All right, guys. So we are picking up with another day learning how to program here. Now, the very first video we done was actually quite a while ago, a couple months maybe. And my friend here has started picking up some more experience here, watching videos, reading stuff on his own, specifically for Python. So that first video we'd had, I think I have it in a link down somewhere here. Let me check. Yeah. The first video we'd had here, I was actually going to have a start doing things with JavaScript and HTML and stuff, because that was my opinion, was that it makes a lot of sense to start with interfaces. So it doesn't matter really, honestly, too much where you start, which language you start with. Although I had suggested that I thought Python and JavaScript were good options, so my friend had done some stuff with Python, and that's actually where we're going to pivot here. We'll try to get into interface stuff when we can, specifically. We'll get into in a sec if we pick up Django, which is the web app framework. But that's kind of where we're going to pick up today. So I start out with just an initial comment about comments in code, how commenting code is important. Not really going to read that. So the next thing to do is just saying that even if we start with just a basic script, learning about some of the initial building blocks of programming, the goal that we should have is probably going to be to do an actual project type goal. So something that's bigger, something that has defined purpose. And this is both for your portfolio, so that you can build something to show prospective clients or employers and things like that, and resume padding basically, and also just for experience for you to get a feel for the sort of work that you'd be doing in any sort of production environment, any sort of employment you might have, like more like the real world, basically. And so I don't think we've actually talked about this a great deal, but I am a full stack web applications developer in my day job. It's what I do. And so, of course, that's where all of my expertise is. And I'm biased, so I think web apps are the way to go, rather than mobile or desktop, which are probably the two other biggest sort of like segments of the application development part. I mean, there's other things in computer science too. Some people write operating systems, some people write drivers. You get the idea. But if you're planning on, being a computer scientist to build applications, well, that's probably going to be desktop or mobile or web. And so I'm web, and that's what I recommend, and that's what I have the most experience in. And so if you're going to do web applications development for Python, there's actually different frameworks. There's one called Flask. It's kind of a smaller so-called micro framework, but Django is probably by far the most used, most popular, largest, most supported Python web framework. And so here's a link to it. Well, rather a link to a tutorial about it. I don't know, I saw this suggested on the internet. I really think that this tutorial is not assuming a great deal of prerequisite knowledge. It goes over the command line and how to install, how to install packages and things like that. So I skimmed through it last night. It looked pretty decent. Now, if we do decide to go through Django, in some ways you'll be in luck, because I've worked with Python and Django both before. I had a web apps class in college, but that was a long time ago. And honestly, our professor kind of just had us read links on the Django website, and we were supposed to kind of struggle through it on our own, because that's how it is in the real world. And I appreciated that in the class. I thought it made sense because, well, in the real world, you're not always just going to be able to have someone nicely teach it to you. You're going to have to learn yourself. But nonetheless, that did mean that I didn't learn it super systematically. And this was a while ago too. Now, of course, I am familiar with concepts in web app development and things, because I do work with the C# ASP.NET tech stack. So that's like Microsoft SQL Server for the database, and then ASP.NET on the back end. And we actually have a JavaScript front end. But all of this means is that if we both try to go through this, and we're building a Django app, and getting our feet underneath us in this way, well, I actually won't have all that much direct experience in this either. And so I think it could be a good way, because you'll get to see me try to think on my feet and figure things out at the exact same time you are. And so kind of a good part of the programming process is learning how to learn, basically learning how to look things up, where you find information, things like that. Because most of the time in the real world, you're going to have to learn new things. It's just the nature of software development. Software moves really fast, especially web and mobile probably change quite rapidly. And so you're going to have to get used to being forced to learn new things and being able to learn new things rapidly, and so a big part of it is kind of learning where you go to find information, how to synthesize sources, things like that. I mean, there's not like a wrong answer, but there are some ways that you can do it faster. And all that aside, that's Django web apps. Talking about the project-based approach, which is what you want to get real experience, kind of get your feet wet in a more realistic way as to what you'd be doing in the real world. Well, we can give all of that some time until we're absolutely sure that we have the sort of basic building blocks, the fundamentals down, so that when we go start getting into things like that, we can actually do things rather than just learning about how to configure settings and sort of the boring stuff there. So as you may remember from this video here, I was a big fan of doing things with interfaces like directly from day one, rather than trying to do everything on the command line, just because if you do everything on the command line, it doesn't really feel like an application. It keeps you kind of crippled in terms of interface, and you never learn how to do user interface design and things like that. But just for the sake of acquiring a working knowledge of code, as I say here, that was certainly what I was pushing for here. But you've done Python. Python doesn't as seamlessly just let you execute things. I mean, you sure can, but as we'll see when we set up Django, to be able to interface with HTML pages and stuff in Python, you certainly can, but that's what a web app is. And so we'll get to that once we get into the web app proper. But for now, we can just go through the topics and concepts and stuff. And so, okay, that's my introductory spiel. I didn't mean for that to take super long here. But my plan for this first day, kind of picking up, if we continue this study here in the mornings together, well, I thought we would basically, go over all the stuff that I think is important to start, and we can skip anything that you demonstrate a good working knowledge of. So I'm not going to sit here and try to teach you something that you already know, because that wastes my time and it wastes your time. And so you said you've already seen some stuff. And my plan then is just, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about things to make sure that you know something. And if you do, well, then we'll just skip it and move on, because there's no need for us to go back and cover things you already know. With that being said, I'm going to be pretty thorough. I want to make sure that you actually know something, not that you can maybe pass the multiple choice test on it, but that you understand how it works and how to use it and things like that. And you should also ask questions here. I will tell you that was something I did a lot of in college. People knew me in college as, oh, he's the tall guy, asks lots of questions. Oh, okay, him. Because I've always thought that that's the most efficient way to learn, because I'm not going to know what you don't know. You're going to know what you don't know. And so if you don't communicate that to me, I'm never going to know. So just don't feel bad ever about interrupting and asking questions if something doesn't make sense. In fact, ask lots of them, because it's usually the fastest way. And the other thing here is having someone around who can just answer your questions like that. This is really the biggest part. I think when we spoke yesterday, I mentioned this, that having a work team where you have people who are senior to you, more experienced developers, is the fastest way to learn how to code, because a lot of the times it's not just the concepts, it's also like you get stuck on something specifically, and having someone who can get you unstuck is like enormously helpful in increasing the speed at which you can learn. So Descartes, that's me. Let me see, all of the final note here before we actually get into stuff. Let's see, I said I didn't come in with tons. I might certainly put some links here, but I didn't do tons of documentation links, because like I was mentioning before, an important part of this process is learning how you find this stuff on the internet. And so if I just give it all to you up front, you're never going to learn how to find it. So we'll do that together some. See, I said I can talk about most of this off the top of my head. That's another reason for not links, but most of it is just that we need to practice getting the process. All right, so I know we're going kind of whirlwind here. These two first links, I included these things. You can tell me how interested you are in doing like string parsing stuff. That's what regular expressions are for. I use it quite a bit, actually. I use it all the time, both in work and in other projects I have. So SQL and regular expressions, neither one of these things are programming languages per se, but they are very, very useful tools, I will say, in basically how your code interfaces with other things. That's SQL. This is how you query database systems. And databases are where applications store their data. So you don't, as we'll get into with variables and stuff, you don't just store information in a very large application in just strings in system memory, because you might have hundreds or thousands of users and you need to keep all of the data consistent, and how you access those records and things. Well, that's all goes through databases. And the way that you communicate with databases is through SQL. And actually, to be precise, as we'll see, if we ever get into Django or other web apps, almost, well, not almost no one, some people still do, but most people do not write actual SQL queries anymore, which is what you'll be learning here. Most people write like a programming or like a framework's like wrapper of SQL. However, the same concepts will apply. So this is super normal SQL. Select, some subset of fields from this table is what this is. Select from where, so we might see here, if we go look at the database, you could say where, if you wanted to modify this to only pull back a specific person, we might say where, name, we have what, first name equals something like that. So queries like this, super, super common. So anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. The reason why I have these two queries was if you want to read about these things, they both have resources. I just randomly Googled, and this one I use all the time. This lets you instantly preview a regular expression. So if I wanted to find every regular expression that was just a word, it's kind of its own special language for finding things. And if I wanted to find phone numbers, I would probably do something. Oops, that's not what I want. Probably something. So you could do something like 0 through 9, and then do 3 things that are 0 through 9, and then a dash, and then 4 things that are 0 through 9. I'm just doing an example off the top of my head. And if you want to do a phone number, this is completely random. I don't know what this phone number is. Don't call it. But this, oops, that should be a 4. Will match a phone number. And what you normally do this for is to do this for finding things in the text or replacing things in the text. I won't get into all of this. Regular expressions, very useful, very powerful. The reason why I'm giving you both of these things up front is because both of these things are, I'm trying to think about the best way to say them. They're almost like puzzles. They're almost like games. If you ever burn out on programming proper, if you just sit here and practice SQL for a little bit, figure out how you do stuff with tables. I don't want to overwhelm you, but both of these websites that I've linked here are really easy tools to just kind of take a break and go. And like I said, regular expressions, to me, I actually really like them because they're almost always like a puzzle to me, like a brain teaser. How do I select this text? And the cool thing about this application right here, this web app, is that you can literally preview the things that you're matching. So for example, let's say that I messed up and I didn't have the number of digits right. Well, I can go, I can only match 2 there, but oh, you see, well, I'm not matching the whole string. Well, what should I do? I need to match more characters, things like that. Okay, so any questions on why I'm linking these things, the purpose of it? And I mean, it may not be immediately clear why these things are useful, but I can assure you that both learning how to do regular expressions and learning at least the ideas behind querying things in SQL will be very, very useful eventually.
So the first thing I'm interested in right now is get that SQL has a lot to do with databases, and regular expressions has to do with finding, maybe matching things in the text. But do you have some like real world scenarios, like some examples that, can we get to that sometime when you can demonstrate to me some use of that?
Sure. Okay, so SQL, I mean, without us having an application, it's kind of hard to give you a real example here, but because like, the infrastructure for setting up an application, that where you have a database and a login string and all of that, well, you kind of need an application that does something before you can really see it. Like I can't show you my work stuff, for example, but regular expressions, here, actually, the project that I have up here, I'm working on something to do parsing for files to convert markdown text into the format for slides. I think I mentioned this to you. This was the project I was working on. I started doing it with the class and decided, I don't really need a class. But you asked to see regular expressions. Well, this probably actually isn't going to mean much to you because I'm building the regular expression with variables. But this right here is a regular expression. So I'm compiling the regular expression for performance, which means up front at the beginning of when I run this script, I'm building a whole bunch of regular expressions, one to match each kind of thing in the text. So what this looks like is I'll have something that looks something like this. So I might have something in the text where I'm, giving someone a cautionary note. And so in Markdown, this is where I'm writing the content. I use a static site generator to build websites. Well, here, I will actually put all of this here in the dynamic parser, and I'll show you an example of how this works. So the number signs are the comments in Python. We don't need those here. Oops, in fact, that's the space. So let me copy that in the wrong spot. So this right down here on this particular application is, this is like the text area. So, if I were to just copy a bunch of stuff in there, that's not relevant, some before, some after. Well, what I want to be doing here is capturing this section right here, because what I'm actually going to be doing in this Python script high level, again, this is what I was going to work on kind of in the background if I ever gave you tasks and stuff and we're just waiting for you to finish. Well, what I'm doing is I'm finding these sections and then I'm going to be replacing them with, let me see, here's an example, one of the sections. I'm going to be replacing them with HTML. So the static site generator normally does this when I build a website, but I'm building pages for slides instead. So I'm going to kind of emulate a site generator all on my own. So high level, I want to be finding things that look like this, things that look like these sections here in my Markdown, and then I want to be transforming them into HTML. This is an example of me using regular expressions. So now I'll actually match it. I'll show you what the regular expression looks like. Tell me if this is like going way too fast for you to keep up with. But down here in the setup for the script, I am building a regular expression that contains matching the characters. Actually, I should probably backslash escape it. We'll see, but it's matching the characters, open curly brace, percentage sign, concatenated, using that word here of strings, concatenated with the special content section name here. So one of these, like example or cautionary note or side note or whatever, concatenated with this business right here, and then the name again and the closing. And so this right here is matching a tag. This right here is matching a tag. And what this here is doing is it's matching everything between the tags. And so let me copy this into the thing where we test it here. I didn't mean for us to take forever on this, by the way. This was more just going to be, like these things, you can just take my word for it now, but these things will be useful to know eventually. And I kind of view them as a good way to kind of have a break from some of the, actually, that wasn't the best. The thing that I was copying was actually a variable where I was building it. And we're actually just going to go ahead and test the string directly. But these were more just because you get to have kind of like a puzzle, something that you can kind of just turn around to and mess around with, like on your own time. If you get bored of actually reading the formal programming concepts or whatever. All right, so you see how that text just turned blue? That means we're matching it. So you tell me how much more you want me to talk about here. This is matching the first line here. You see the text matches exactly. And the cool thing about this website is it has like a tree that parses. It parses all over the things that match. So well, I mean, I don't know how much detail to dive into here. The dot character is special, reserved in regular expressions. It matches any character that is not a new line. And then /n is an escape character that matches new lines. /r, sometimes there's a carriage return before a new line on Windows specifically. And so these things here match new lines. So we're saying match any character or match a new line, match 0 or more of these between these two tags. And so this section right here matches everything between the two tags. Now I can get into it more if you'd like, but did that serve as a real world example here for this?
Yes, it does. So the text you have here between I'm coming into this, that is the text you want to match, correct?
So I actually need to know which node it is too. In the code that I'm using here to build, I am matching a whole bunch of these sections. You can see I actually made it generic, so I pass in the sections I'm matching as a variable. I haven't actually tested this, by the way. I was just writing a whole bunch of code yesterday. But you know, like I have all these sections. All of these sections contain text. I want to turn all of that text into HTML so that I can inject it into this template thing here, which builds the slides that I'm doing. So all of the HTML, the text from the sections will get injected into the HTML using this variable. Sorry, what did you ask?
I was asking, I'm trying to figure out exactly, okay, how do I explain this? This portion where you have the blue text and stuff, is this where the thing that you want to match should be?
Yes, what you're matching is highlighted blue in this section of the site's interface.
Okay.
And so,
right. But what about this part on top?
This right here?
No, the one you just yes, that part.
That is the regular expression itself.
Okay.
So, you know, maybe this wasn't the best place to start. I was linking these simply because I don't know. What was going through my head last night when I was building this, but I was more or less going to introduce them as like brain teasers, as if you want a distraction ever, it's helpful to know both of these things, and especially like the ins and outs. Like you're going to have to learn about, you know, like the where conditions to filter things, and then union, join, group by, what's another one? Order by, things like that in queries, because you will use database queries all the time when you get into real applications, and regular expressions as well. It shouldn't take you forever to get up to speed on them. They look like completely random to you, like this.
Yeah.
when you like don't know what it means, just looks like gibberish. But eventually you get the hang of it, and they're really, really powerful because they let you script. Finding and replacing things in text.
Okay. And script is more like just automates the action, right? That's
what it means. What it means is that in most programs, they let you find and replace things. Like in the browser, if you press Control F, you get the find window, and you can see here that this has a find and replace. And so if let's say every time I want to replace the word first, and I want to replace the word first with here, by default, I think it's Control H. Yeah, I want to replace the the word first with the word last. So I'm not using any regular expressions here. I just replaced first with last there. Now, if I wanted to replace the word first, and let's say, I'm trying to come up with a good example to show you why it's powerful. Well, just take my word for it. Normally in finding and replacing, you don't have a lot of flexibility in what you choose. Regular expressions lets you capture things from what you find, and then you can do things with the text. But I should be very upfront that not all programmers end up using regular expressions a lot. We end up using it on my team at work. We use it a lot for validating things. So if you have a text box on your website where the user is going to type in something and you expect it to be a phone number, well, you need to make sure it's actually a phone number, that it matches the characters that you expect it to. Or if there's a serial number for a product, we have something that has serial numbers. Well, you need to make sure it's in the proper format for a serial number. So if the user tries to upload like a new object that like doesn't match the serial number because the serial number is bad, well, then they can't. We say, no, you can't do that, try again. You know, give them an error message explaining what the problem is. So regular expressions get used a lot for validation. That's probably what we use it most for at work. But I also use it all the time. Of all the tools, funnily enough, I use regular expressions a whole lot when I write code as well. If I decide, well, I mean, not all the time, but frequently enough, and I use it quite a bit for just messing around on my own in like my own like text files and stuff. If I decide, you know what, so I'll give you an example. I pull stuff. 1 second here. Let me go pull up a good file. Stop sharing for a sec. I'll give you another active. I'm sorry this has turned into a regular expression demo, but we have plenty of time. You know, like I said, I can do this most mornings. So let me open up a new text editor here. Okay, share my screen again. I don't need to see all my files there. You can see my screen, right? Like, do you see Visual Studio Code?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Ichthys, and I am going to copy text from a study, and I'll show you how I clean it up with regular expressions. So let's do the First Peter series. This is how I've been preparing things. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this text here in the study. Okay, copied all the text. Okay, in Google Chrome, I have a bookmark for pasting to Markdown. Because I'm lazy, you can do this on the command line too, but you just paste text, it converts it all to Markdown. Okay, great. So now I just took the text that was on Ichthys, I turned it into Markdown, which is that programming language that I've mentioned. And now I want to clean this up. So one of the things that Ichthys does is, you see how it has these links here, the Bible study links? Well, it so happens that whenever I build things, the links will get generated automatically if you have them in the text, and it looks kind of ugly when I'm working with it. So if I go to my settings file in Visual Studio, I can set up regular expressions here to clean up files. So I have a regular expression that's going to remove the bibliolinks from converted Ichthys text. So that's what I called it. I'm using a plugin here for Visual Studio Code that lets me save regular expressions and run them on files. In a menu, I'll show you that in a second. So this is the regular expression, which, like I said, probably looks like nonsense to you. But what I'm going to do here, and I'll show you what it looks like in a sec, is I want to just replace all of this. I want to replace all of this with just the text Acts 16 through 16, 19. I don't need the link part of it. And so I will press, oops, that's not what I want. I will press Control-Alt-R, which pulls up this menu. And so you see that was what I just did. That's a regular expression. And when I run that, boom, all of these things got converted to just text. Other features here, you see this thing? This has a space, and then this character is some invisible Unicode character. Don't ask me why this happens. I really have no idea why sometimes when copying off Ichthys this happens. I'm going to go ahead and remove Unicode characters here. And so that replaced things that were Unicode characters with spaces. Now, I think these are like non-breaking spaces or some HTML thing, but doesn't make any sense in a file here. Other things, so if I have block quotes, looks like there's one at the bottom here. This is how you denote quotes in Markdown. Well, by default, the Markdown parser signifies line breaks by backslashes like this. Well, the thing is, my Markdown parser, the one that I use to build my website and stuff, signifies line breaks by 2 spaces. So the first thing I do is I remove 2 spaces from, where am I looking? Remove duplicate spaces. Sometimes ICTIS has 2 spaces between sentences and stuff. And then what I'll do is I will use 2 spaces rather than backslashes for signifying line breaks. So I can go on, but I run a bunch of stuff like this. I mean, and actually I've been lazy. If in this menu here, I could actually set up a list of these rules to be run in a certain order every time rather than going and doing all of myself, which I really should. I just haven't gotten around to setting it up yet. And I would do that by specifying a rule here, a set of these to be run, whatever. But
so all these rules you just showed from the drop down menu come from this code you wrote with the regular expressions.
That's correct.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is just another motivating example of it. Because I don't have forever, because I have to go to work this morning, how about we jump into the actual stuff? You're always welcome to ask me questions about this. Why I was introducing these, like I said, it was just because if you ever have 10 minutes here or there, or you want to take a break from something else, these are like brain teasers. That is how I recommend you view them in terms of how you learn them. Because if you view it as just like a casual diversion that happens to have really useful practical benefits, like if you've ever played one of those goofy games where it wants you to like arrange, I don't know, like fruits on a screen so that you build a certain configuration of fruits. I'm just making something up, but there's like brain puzzles like this or whatever. Well, view this along those lines of what magical syntax, what incantation can I make to do the thing that I want? You do that for both SQL. How do I get a list of patients? This is their example database has patients and physicians. This is like basically the database that you'd use if you were building an application to help out a doctor's office. A doctor's office has to track patients and physicians and medications and nursing units and so on. And so you can see all of the variables. This may not mean too much to you, like what an ID is. What does this key mean next to it? It means it's the primary key ID and things like that. But if you start learning how you would get certain information out of the database and insert certain information into the database, suddenly you're going to have a much better understanding of how database systems work. So technically speaking, I haven't even told you at all what a relational database management system is, but why I'm advocating for some of this is because we spent months and months and months in college learning about how binary works and how computers save stuff, but that doesn't help you at all in actually using the things. So me telling you how a string gets compiled down into binaries terminated by a null character, like that's just gee whiz information for you. It doesn't help you write an application. And that's why I'm sticking you on these things immediately, is because no matter what kind of application you write, you're going to have a database. That's how you store information on computer systems. So you're going to have to learn, how do I get things into and out of the database? I mean, at work, where I work on an enterprise level logistics application, we make database queries literally all the time. What's a good example that I can give you? So we have users in our application. Users have permissions. They can only do certain things in the application. Every time a user hits a web page on the website, we need to check, does this user have permissions to do these things on the web page? We do that with the database query. Does the motivation of why I've introduced these things make sense?
Yes.
And so the sequence for this isn't so much that I want you to go look at these things and learn everything you can about these pages right today and ignore all this, because everything down here, this right here, if there's one thing, and this is kind of where I wanted to go since I have limited time here, this first section, you see how I've put some new lines between sections. This is kind of how I thought we'd clump things. This first section is important stuff. This is dealing with variables and data types. And then we're gonna go over debugging after that. And then we'll talk about functions and argument passing and functions. And then we'll talk about code flow execution generally, which would be like conditionals and loops. And once you get all of that, after we go through everything here, I am not going to have you learn anything new for a while. I'm going to make you practice a lot. because everything here, this is what I would consider the very basics of programming. And once you have this, you can do most things. And then I just started off the top of my head last night writing out the other stuff. Python uses Lambda functions all over the place, very useful. And then object-oriented programming, which you should get used to because it's by far the dominant programming paradigm. So most of these words probably don't mean anything to you right now, but we'll get there eventually. All right, so let me see. If I'm going to hold myself to my deadline, I don't have real long here.
Is there something you want me to work on?
So let me just try to get a brief overview of what knowledge you already have, because I don't know where you've been going on your own for the last little bit. So, I mean, assuming you know what a variable is, this would be something like x equals 5, right?
Yeah.
And that's what variable assignment is. I bet you already know that when we say x equals 5, are we saying that x is actually equal to 5, or are we setting this is setting the value of x, right? So-called assignment operator. This is different than saying x equals 5, because if I want to say
algebra,
is x equal to 5, I would instead do something with 2 equal signs, right? And so this right here is a variable on the left-hand side of an assignment operation. This is the assignment operator. This is a value on the right-hand side of the assignment operation. In Python, you can actually assign anything to a variable because variables do not have data. Well, they don't enforce data types. They're not called strongly typed languages. In something like C, I would have to make this statement valid, I would have to put the data type before the variable name. In Python, you don't, because Python is a dynamically typed language. So you can assign anything to variables. So after saying x is 5, I could say this, and that's perfectly valid. This is a string, which we'll get to eventually. But I could also make it a list. So I could say x is, like the list of our names. Okay. And then if I comment this out here, and we run this. So one of the benefits of having just a scratch file like this is it lets you test things. So if I just print this and we run this, we should see this list printed out over here in the console. Right? Does it make sense what I just did? So if you've followed programming tutorials, this is probably like easy peasy. Print statements are how most people have you learn off coding rather than interfaces. So you feel like you're good on this?
Yeah, I'm really good on it.
Okay, there's more to say. Like specifically, what does it mean when you bind something into a variable? But we don't really need to get into like memory addresses and stuff like that. We will later when we talk about passing arguments and functions. Okay, so data types. Well, you know what? Sorry, I started teaching there rather than getting where you are in information. Are you familiar with these data types? Int, double, Boolean, tuple, string. Those sound familiar?
Yeah, they do.
Okay, and then
tuple is the one that's it's a bit weird for me, but it doesn't seem very hard to understand.
Tuples are basically lists that you can't modify. They're read-only lists. So this right here is a list. A tuple, we would do something in parentheses. So let me try to give you the basic difference. So right here, I can do something like I can change the first value of this. So this is indexing into it. So if I do something like this, can you tell me what this line would do?
Yeah, it would change Stephen to Jane.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to change this, right? So if we run this, we should see Jane and Audie, right? Okay. Now, if I have a tuple and I say y is going to be equal to this same thing here, except the syntax for tuples in Python. So syntax is basically like how you write stuff, the rules governing, and we try to do the same thing. So when I say a tuple is an immutable data type, what that means is that it doesn't let you change things. And so you should see, we should get an error here. This will still work fine, but we'll get an error because it says you can't support item assignment. It doesn't let you change things. So a tuple is a list that doesn't let you change things. That's literally what it is. Now, if we were going to be precise, if we had a list of objects, you could still change objects within the list, but you couldn't change the list itself. We'll get to exactly what that means later. So that's tuples. So these right here, these data types are called so-called primitive types. Actually, interestingly, in Python, you may have come across this before. Strings are immutable in Python. In most languages, strings are not immutable. So like Java, for example, if you have a string, you're allowed to change characters within the string, just how you would an array.
All right, but in Python, you can't do that.
You cannot. So if I have a variable here, again, my name, and I want to, change the first character of my name to a Z, for example. So I want to set the value here in the string. It's not going to let me do that. So we know that doesn't work because that's immutable assignment. Well, actually, you'll see here that strings are immutable as well. String object does not support item assignment. This line of code here, well, okay, most languages would actually use like strings would be double quotes and characters would be single quotes, and characters a different data type than a string. Does Python even have characters? I don't know. I would say, let me Google it. Character data type. Yeah, okay, there is no character data type. So I'm glad that's not a stupid question, because in languages like C, there is. So in C, these two strings would be different. In Python lets you use open, quotes versus single quotes versus double quotes interchangeably. Where is I going with this? Yes, strings are immutable. So we'll pick back up. Maybe this wasn't so great because we spent a lot of time on the things that were supposed to just be, hey, if you ever have time and get bored, look at these things. That was the TLDR of everything we went through here. If you have time and get bored, these are good ways to exercise your brain while learning useful things about programming. This first section, if you want homework before we go again, if anything here doesn't look familiar, slicing in Python is kind of strange. This is like if I index into an array, and I want to get the entire array. Have you seen this before in Python?
One of those things I'm not used to yet.
Okay. So if I want to get the entire array here, wonder if I can block comment stuff. This isn't the IDE I normally use. So whatever, I'll just comment it all out. Line by line. So let's say we want to see what the value of y is. So this should get the entire copy of x here. So technically, this is like writing 1 through n. Oops. I don't know if n is defined in Python. No, it's defined in MATLAB, whatever. This is it should print out this list here. What we're doing is we're making a copy of it and we're assigning the value of that copy to y. Now, if I want to get everything but the first one, I would say that I'm going to go from index 1. Now, remember, lists in programming languages are indexed from 0, not 1. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So this should get everything from Audie to Bob in the list. Okay. Yeah. And then if I were to do 1 to, let's say, index 1 to index 2, 0, 1, 2, this should get Audie and Jane.
Yeah.
Or sorry, so this must be starting index, and then you go up to this index, but not including it. And so, sorry, I misspoke there. So 1 to 3 would be Audie and Jane, because you're going to go from index 1, starting at index 1, up to but not including index 3. So 0, 1, 2, but up to but not including 3, which means 0, 1, 2 should be Audie and Jane. Now you can also go everything up to index 3. Probably up to but not including. Let's see if it's up to but not including. Yeah, up to but not including index 3. So that's pretty cool. Pretty powerful syntax for slicing things. Python does this. Most other languages don't have anything that's quite as convenient as that. And then if you just have the colon, so you don't put anything before or after the colon, you just get the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
All right. Well, I have to run. I have to get ready for work. But your homework, such as it is, will be this stuff here. Actually, you know what? If you should probably avoid this last link here on shallow copies and deep copies. It's very confusing stuff. Really throws people in intro programming classes for a loop because it deals with can you modify when you modify a variable, does it modify things that are copies of the variable or not? Python's honestly particularly confusing in this respect because everything, well, if I tell you everything by Python is passed by reference, does that mean anything to you?
It's by reference.
Mm-hmm.
No, but
okay.
I'm
yeah.
wondering
okay.
if I have no idea what
No. I mean, you just shouldn't necessarily. This shouldn't necessarily mean something to you. It will eventually, but what I was going to say is that Python's actually particularly confusing in this regard, probably even more so than many other programming languages, like Python specifically. So I'm assuming you've seen lists before in Python. Dictionaries are a mapping data type. So you have keys in dictionaries that map onto values. These are collection data types, collections of others. Operators, the arithmetic ones, super normal, plus, minus, multiply, divide, exponentiate. And then the logical operators, strictly less than, strictly greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, strict equality, not equal. You use these all the time when you compare numbers and stuff. I don't know, like you may not need too much more on any of this because this is like the really basic stuff. The copies is a little bit harder if you want. In fact, I wouldn't really recommend you. I thought I had a link there. Maybe I didn't. Whatever. We can search for it later. But all right. Well, you know what? We'll cut off there. If you want homework, I would go through and just look at everything I've written out. You know, ignore the advanced topics section. Don't go there. You really probably should know most of this. I would read this one right here, the arguments and functions passing by reference scope. This talks about how you pass variables to functions in Python. Specifically, it talks about, you know, if you pass a variable to a function, you change something in the variable, does it change the variable outside of the function?
Okay.
But after all that, I'll try to blow through stuff tomorrow, and then we'll start doing examples. You know, basically, like I said, once we get to the end here, so once you have normal variable assignment and data types down, including like collections of data, and you have debugging down because you should learn how to debug and do it all the time because you will do it all the time, and functions, and then conditionals and for loops, which is how you control the state of code execution. Once you have all of that, I don't want to say you can do everything, but in terms of like contrived programming problems that make you think how to program, how to break problems down, you can do most things. Oh, one other thing, let me actually put this up here. Another thing that you can practicing making flowcharts. There's a really cool website. Honestly, I should probably pay for a subscription for it. I use it enough. I don't use it in an unethical sense. There's a website called Code to Flow here. Let me get the URL. And a lot of web flowchart tools really stink. They make you like lay things out, like make you lay things out kind of in a drag and drop graphical user interface. But what happens if you want to kind of help yourself understand how code works, like the execution of code? This is 100% what you want. So this is their example. It's really simple to do. Like, let's say you have an initial statement where you start, and then you have if is in array. Like, let's pretend that that's a Boolean variable here. Well, if it's in the array, we might want to remove it. Something like that. You see, we are now showing how a program would work. This right here would be how a delete function works for the most part. If something's in an array, you remove it. And if it's not in the array, you throw an error. That's how a delete function works. But I just did this. You see how fast I did that? I built it in like 15 seconds, right? And so, I mean, this website is not very hard. Like if you click on help, it'll tell you how you write things, basically. I mean, it can get really complicated and stuff. But you know, the main point is if you can just pseudocode out, if you write things in pseudocode, then you can just magically make flowcharts automatically, which is super useful. So that's another thing you can just mess around with, because once you start sharing code with people, I mean, you can like give them the function and a lot of programmers will be fine. Like, so for example, if I pull back up my project right now, if I were to give one of my coworkers something like this, they'd probably understand it eventually, but they'd have to go there and squint at it a little bit. Actually, this is a single assignment statement. You know, if I gave them a function that was doing something like this. So for the index in the range of special content section names, first you're going to grab the name, then you're going to grab the regular expression pattern, and then you're going to run a regular expression on the string. That's what this code does. Well, I could very easily make a flowchart out of this that might help someone understand it. I really do have to go to work now. We'll start here. All three of these things, good things to practice for programmers. Tomorrow we'll pick up, hopefully we can get through most things here. Because if we can, then I'll just give you problem after problem after problem to make you practice, you know, programming and doing things with it. If there's any specific examples you want to go over, like, I don't know, usually beginning programming problems feel a bit contrived. I was going to try to avoid that as much as possible by building things that actually look like applications. But if you're doing command line programs, there's only so much you can do. So for example, things that I'll probably make you do, I'll make you, taking in a list of integers, I'll make you return the maximum value, the minimum value, the median value, take the average of it. What are other basic things? Like sort that list, reorder that list, things like this. I don't know if you've done any of those, but yeah, we'll do that. We'll do things where if you have a list of like items and their prices, I'll make you write me a function that gets the price of an item of a specific name. I'll make you get a function that returns the item with the highest price. You see where I'm going with all this? You know, like all of that sort of thing is exactly the sort of thing that you do when you're a programmer. And the good news is now you have enough information that you should be able to do everything I just said once you have this stuff. So tell me if I go too fast. But what we're going to try to do is get the basics out of the way here, and then we'll just practice for a while, because past a certain point, once you have these things, you know enough to actually code most things. I will say that most of what I do day to day, aside from the database stuff, which I'm having you start on as well, just whenever you have a second, aside from the database stuff and understanding how data flows in web applications. So from the database into service methods, into the controllers that do the routing, and routing being like, if you go to this internet address, it'll go to this web page. Aside from the information that lets me know how all of that works, what I actually write day to day, even in C#, which is what I write in, it's just this stuff. It's just, functions, well, actually classes too, this stuff plus object oriented, but like it's really not that different. Once you understand how all of this works, you really do know how to program. The rest of it is just, learning how to program in slightly different environments and where data comes from and things like that. But okay, if you have questions, please write them down. I can go over the specifics then that way, and that'll be faster than me trying to guess what you do and don't know. And you know what? I realized that I talked an awful lot today. That's probably going to be normal-ish, but
yeah, and it's fine. I'll always interject when I have a question.
Okay, great. So if you do have questions, write them down. Otherwise, we'll go over more stuff tomorrow, including the debugger, which will be useful. And I'll talk to you then.
Okay. Thanks very much.